1. I'm a 30-year-old woman living in Texas, and I've met my fair share of creeps. But what happened to me yesterday takes the cake. I don't drive, and I work in another city, so I take the bus to and from work, using mostly the same stops on a daily basis. I just started using public transportation last year, so I'm mostly pretty comfortable with it by now, which makes yesterday's experience all the more unnerving. I had gone to the store after work for some soda, so I had a reusable bag with 2 liters in one hand and my purse in the other. Approaching the bus stop, I saw a woman sitting inside. It's one of the shelter types. And while I'm normally very shy and won't sit down if someone is in there, I considered it because I was feeling fairly sick and my feet hurt after being on them all day. That idea quickly disappeared when I got closer and could hear her muttering to herself. I did a quick glance over as I walked past, and I could see she had bags spread out over that side of the bench, and her shoes were off, so I concluded she was probably homeless, and since her muttering to herself definitely put me on my guard, I walked past the stop to maybe 2 yards away, or so, and set the reusable bag down. Uncomfortable, I pull out my phone and begin to text my best friend to tell her, and this is about when I start noticing what she's saying. Things like, "Don't call me sweetie. I'll fucking murder you." Okay, hackles raised even more, and though I'm curious to take a peek over, I figure it's probably best not to risk antagonizing her at all, as I don't want her to turn her attention to me. I keep messaging with my friend, and the lady is muttering the entire time. Things such as, "Don't call me sweetie, don't call me honey, don't call me anything." She's also saying things I can't quite catch, but one I did was, "I'll wrap my hands around your throat and fucking kill you." At this point, I'm thinking maybe I should nope it out of there. But the bus is set to arrive any minute, and even though the station is just down the street, I'm reluctant to try for it because I just really want to get home. Stupid, I know, but she hadn't done anything to make me think she'd even notice I existed yet. Around this time, I hear her begin saying things about a fat slut. Now this certainly alarms me, as I am not a slim woman, and slut is fairly gender specific. But what sends shivers down my spine is when I hear, "Your phone doesn't scare me." Clearly she's speaking about to me now, as I've had my phone out since I got there. Just as I'm about to grab my bag, I look to the side, and she's now outside the shelter staring at me with a look of intense hatred. She's still maybe 1.5 yards between us, but it's not enough to make me risk leaning over to pick up that bag and possibly give her an opening. She starts again with how I've got to stop calling her sweetie, but now I can hear the other stuff I was missing before. Things about how she wasn't going to fuck me, she wasn't going to worship me, I wasn't going to cost her her morals or her relationship with God, and just all kinds of crazy shit. I'm looking anywhere but at this woman, completely terrified, as she keeps talking about murdering me and putting her hands around my neck. She sits back down, and I completely, idiotically, am frozen to the spot, and I feel like I don't dare even lean over, even now that she's a safe distance away. Also, this is taking place next to a very busy road that directly connects to a highway, so I think it gave me a false sense of security. She keeps muttering. I slowly come to the conclusion my bus isn't coming, and I'm now near tears, and then she gets up again. She is much more vehement now, and I'm completely terrified. The most scared I've been in my life. I see a man crossing the street as he steps onto the sidewalk. I take a deep breath and hope for the best, lean over and grab my bag, and I nope the fuck out of there, watching over my shoulder the entire way. I walked down to the next bus stop and immediately call the police, who connect me to the right department, and I tell them what happened. Although my physical description isn't very good since, as I told them, I hardly even glanced at her, as I was worried about antagonizing her. Not long after that, a family member happened by and gave me a ride, so I didn't have to bother with the bus at all. Also, my brother lives in an apartment complex just down the road from that stop, and he told me she's been sleeping there for about a week, and he had a minor encounter with her last night, so I guess they didn't find her. But she was gone this morning, and still gone this afternoon, so maybe someone else complained. I hope so, because not only do I fear for the safety of people who come into contact with her, I did legitimately fear for my safety throughout the encounter. I feel really sorry for her, and hope she can get the help she needs as well. 2. So first off, I haven't really told this story to more than a handful of friends yet. Not sure why, as I've been reading others' encounters in this subreddit for a while, and it seems like it would fit well. Maybe because at this point it doesn't really faze me, but it was damn scary at the time. Presently I am a 19-year-old college student, gender fluid and usually assumed as male, because I have very androgynous features. At the time this happened, I was about 15 and still rather feminine. Backstory on my situation: I grew up in a very right-wing conservative small town in the Midwest. I never fit in at school, mostly because I was openly gay and had a diagnosed mental illness. This is one of those stereotypical small towns. You can't hide things from anyone. I'd say that it didn't help that I was very into gothic fashion at the time. I always dressed in black, lots of eyeliner, black lipstick, chains, the whole 9 yards. Needless to say, I never really fit in high school, which makes this encounter even weirder for me. I was a costumer for our school's theatre productions, and usually spent a lot of time after school getting ready for the next big play. At the time this incident happened, I'd already been working on a dress rehearsal for our haunted house. We were set to open it on Halloween night, so I'd say it was around late October. The cast was getting ready to celebrate the effort put in by the tech crew in a pre-opening party. I had been invited, and a couple of kids that I wasn't particularly close with offered to give me a ride over to our production director's house. However, being a bit of an outcast and a recluse to begin with, I turned them down on the offer. I was waiting for my friend Jordan to come pick me up. The rehearsal had lasted several hours, and it was nearing midnight when nearly everyone finally left. At that point, it was just me, this boy named Jason, who I've had contact with, a girl named Megan, who I didn't really enjoy being around, and our drama teacher, Ms. Lee. Not wanting to really stand around and listen to Jason and Megan talk about the excitement of being part of the biggest prep clique in our school, I excused myself to leave the commons area and sit outside on the stairs. I was only there for a few minutes when this black van with all black windows pulled into the parking lot. I didn't think much of it at first, as they drove past me, and the lights were still on in the cafeteria because Ms. Lee hadn't packed up yet. So I kind of ignored it, until I glanced up again and saw the van very slowly backing up to stop in front of the stairs I was seated at the top of. Note that the stairs weren't the main stairs either. They were a good bit away from the main entrance to the school, and I enjoyed sitting there because nobody really used them. I stood up almost immediately, looking at the van in suspicion. I can remember my heartbeat speeding up. I actually was genuinely terrified for a moment, and for good reason too, as within seconds, the door to the back of the van opened and this guy stepped out, wearing a dark grey hoodie. With how late it was, I couldn't even see his face, but I don't think I even cared about that. My instincts kicked in almost immediately. I bolted back to the cafeteria doors, pulling on the handle, only to realize they were locked. Megan turned around at the noise, but I'm pretty sure she was just kind of amused that I'd locked myself out. I would normally roll my eyes, but I could swear I heard footsteps, and I started pounding on the glass. I guess it was because I was so fucking freaked that she finally opened the door and pulled me in, and started asking what happened. I quickly tried to recount the events in as minor detail as I possibly could. Let's all think of how dumb teenagers could be. I didn't want to look like a wimp, and went back to the door to peer out into the darkness. As soon as I look outside, I had a double take. There was no van anywhere. I tried to laugh it off, and I was really shaken up. When my teacher came over to ask what was wrong, I basically shook her off before adding that Jordan had messaged me, saying she was sick and I needed a ride. My drama teacher took me home. End of story. So I honestly don't know if whoever was in that van actually meant me harm. But the situation was totally fucked. Guys in the creepy black van that pulled up to me in high school, let's not meet. 3. Me, female, 25, setting, nice neighborhood, suburban Midwest. One of my biggest fears is someone breaking into my home. I'm an extremely light sleeper, so the slightest noise, light, anything otherwise disturbing the darkness and silence as I sleep will wake me. My parents live in a neighborhood that is very nice, very wealthy, heavily wooded with houses quite close to one another, until you reach the end of it, where our house is located. The houses are a bit further apart, and until recently, it was far less built up than the area near the entrance. Our yard isn't too large, and there aren't mature trees, but there is a large field that breaks up our neighborhood and the one behind it. We have a ranch-style house, and my bedroom has 2 large windows that gives me a view to the front yard. From my bed I can see the yard lamp that provides a rather small pool of light. Just beyond that is the road. The other window looked into part of my backyard. Preface of sorts. When I was in high school, my boyfriend used to sneak over to stay the night quite a few times. This is a rather disgusting detail, but he would open up my bedroom window that looked into the backyard in order to take a piss. I didn't have screens. One night at about 12 a.m. mid-piss, he sort of freaked out, saying he saw someone walking about the backyard. He quickly adjusted himself, closed the window, and I took a look out back. I could vaguely see an outline of someone surveying the property, almost near the deck. I panicked, and immediately ran out to go wake up my dad. He jumps out of bed, sort of storms out onto the deck, turns the outside lights on and looks around. He can't see anything, so he decides to go have a walk around the deck. Again, nothing. He goes back to bed. I'm terrified. 2 more bizarre instances occurred. The second one, also involving my boyfriend during high school. His mother was compliant with him staying over for a bit, because she understood my dad was strict, and so she'd agree to come pick him up in the evening when my dad wouldn't allow him there. She would park quite a bit up the street and wait for him to jump out my window and walk over. This evening, at about 11 p.m., well after my dad went to sleep, my boyfriend left, and I watched as he slowly made his way through the dark yard. I could see his mother's car in the distance. Abruptly, I saw his figure gain speed, swiftly walking until he broke out in a sprint toward the headlights. I was confused, but assumed that he was eager to get to her car. As soon as her car took off, however, he called me on his mother's cell phone, saying that someone was watching him and started to chase him. I was afraid and sort of doubted his story, but I decided I didn't want to bother my dad again. I tried to sleep it off. Fast forward to 3 years later. When I am 19, I was back home for the summer from college. I was enrolled in a summer language program, and I had gotten back from work at 10 p.m. I needed to do homework, and was up quite late working. Near 1 a.m., I noticed that something wasn't right with the yard lamp out front. My curtains are quite thin, so a change in the light was noticeable. I pushed them slightly open and saw what appeared to be a person standing in front of it, to where they were blocking the glow. Then a red cloth was thrown over the light. I was terrified, not knowing what the hell was going on. So I threw my books, ran to my dad's room and woke him up. He looks out the front windows near the door, sees the red cloth, and mutters a "what the fuck" before walking out front. He takes off the cloth, looks around, and comes back inside. It was a red towel. He says it's probably some dumb kids, puts the towel in the laundry room, and he went back to bed. I was still anxious and creeped out, thinking it was some kind of marker or symbol or something. I'll add that after washing the towel, it is in the linen closet, in the bathroom in regular use by my household. Facepalm. The story of stories. I wanted to include the above instances to give you an idea of how I developed my anxiety and general uneasiness about prowlers, potential intruders, creepers, etc. This instance occurred over the summer, when I was again staying at my parents' house for a few months before moving to another city. As I said, I'm a very light sleeper, and the curtains that my mother put up in my bedroom are nearly sheer. It was about 3 a.m., and I was fast asleep. The sound of a vehicle stirred me awake, and I saw the glare of headlights out front through the curtains. I immediately sat up and opened the curtains. It was a truck that was sitting out front of the driveway, and then started to drive on slowly. I assumed it was the paper deliverer, and was about to collapse back into bed when I saw them abruptly hit the brakes a few feet away from our driveway. From their headlights, I clearly saw a figure of a man walking in front of them. The truck stayed out for about 5 seconds after a man passed in front of them, and then sped off. I watched, frozen, scared, wondering what the hell I was watching. From the shallow light of the lamp out front, I could make out the person walking in our yard, and from my perspective, approaching quite quickly. And in my mind, with a purpose, I shot out of bed and went to the guest room that was right next to mine and looked out the window because it afforded a better, more complete view of the front yard. There was a man standing right at the edge of the circle of light the lamp gave off. Terrified, I woke my parents up, practically screaming and shaking. My dad, now a wary veteran of these wake-up calls, dutifully strolls out of the bedroom, turns on the outside lights, and goes outside. At the same time, I ran back to the guest bedroom to watch the figure. As soon as that happened, I saw him retreat into the darkness, and couldn't see him any longer. My dad says, "He's gone," and groggily goes back to bed. My mother is less convinced, and stays up and sits in the family room. After conversing with her briefly about how I'm never sleeping again, I go back to the guest room. Of course, the man has reappeared. From what I could make out from the light given off by the lamp, he was facing our house. I marched out of the room, declaring, "He's back! Fuck this shit! I'm calling 911!" I grabbed the phone, dial and talk to the dispatcher. Meanwhile, the man steps a bit further forward, just enough that I could see something glint in the light. Something metal, something long. It looked like a knife. I'm explaining this as best as I can to the dispatcher. They say they will send a policeman out to survey, and asked if I wanted to give a statement or if I just want them to patrol the area. I said that since I can't see his face, etc., or give any useful information at this point, that I didn't want to give a statement or talk to the officer. Just then the man stepped back, and I couldn't make out his image any longer. I stood there watching, and told the dispatcher that he disappeared. Due to the well-lit yard of our neighbor across the street, however, I was able to see that he had made his way to their driveway and was crouching up it. And then he disappeared from my sight in the massive shrubs that shrouded the front of the house. I informed the dispatcher of this, and we ended the call. Within minutes, a police cruiser approached. Unfortunately, all they did was drive up and down, once. No spotlight, nothing. They stopped at the end of our street for a moment, then sped off. A few minutes after the police had left, the neighbors across the street turned on all their house lights. The front of the house is very open, with a lot of windows. I assumed they had heard or noticed something amiss. At this point, it was about 4 a.m. My mother and I were both unable to sleep. We kept a lookout on our neighbors' houses. In a few hours, when it was daybreak, and an acceptable enough hour, We told our neighbors what we saw to warn them. The people across the street admitted to being awoken by some noise out front and were feeling uneasy. They ended up removing the heavy shrubs from their yard a week later. The next night, both of my parents loaded their gun of choice and kept it near their side of the bed. I took a Xanax with a big glass of wine. Then I moved away anyway. I'll be back home next week, so after reading these stories here, some way creepier and far more dangerous of course, I started to feel a bit nostalgic and unnerved. I don't know what the hell to make of these experiences. I'll never not be terrified of the prospect of a home invasion or any sort of lurker. I'm far more conscious of this than my parents. I make sure all windows and doors are locked no matter what. These experiences have only proved to me how important it is to do this, no matter how secure you feel in your community. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 214. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'd also like to say thanks to everybody who left feedback regarding the question I asked at the end of yesterday's video. It is very much appreciated. Thank you kindly. Well, now that my recording's done, I'm going to go grab myself a nice lolly and soothe my very sore throat. I had a bad night last night regarding the acid reflux, so it's left me feeling a bit delicate today. But nonetheless, the recording is done. It's just editing and everything else to do, so I can enjoy some cool, yummy goodness to help set me right, hopefully. Purely medicinal, you understand, of course. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. Until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.